Well, hello and welcome to Circus History Live. I'm Bruce Hawley, president of the Circus Historical Society. Circus History Live is produced monthly by the CHS. Recordings of previous sessions of this program are available on the CHS YouTube channel. Our featured guest tonight is circus artist, author, and speaker Dave Letterfly Knoderer. I pronounced the K. I didn't mean to do that, Dave, but Knoderer. And without further ado, here's the host of Circus History Live, CHS Vice President Chris Berry. Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks a lot, Bruce. We're really happy to have Dave with us tonight. And the one thing you missed about his long career is also performer, circus performer,
Oh,
and
yes.
he's going to tell us a little bit about those days as an animal performer, especially when it comes to horses, like Liberty horses and so forth. So, Dave, welcome. As Bruce said, we think of you today a lot of times as being really a sign painter, a truck painter, really one of the kind of dying arts that's happening right now. I mean, this is a sign I know that you painted not too long ago, which is a classic image, of a circus clown. But it's much more than that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about, how you got into the circus and the influence your dad had?
I'll be happy to, and thanks for having me here on the show, Bruce and Paul and Chris. The When I was a little kid and I was big enough to see out of the car, I noticed the other pinstripes on the other cars. Remember, way back then, there was ornamental pinstriping on everything. And I saw that decoration and I had the thought, I could do that. And when I got home, I proceeded to decorate my wagon. And then I decorated my bicycle. And then the other kids in the neighborhood would notice that what I was doing, and they'd talk me into doing something for them. So my creativity with paint started early.
So tell me a little bit about your father and Fred Finning Jr., who was a longtime member and really publisher of Bandwagon and so forth. They were good friends back in Ohio, weren't they?
They were boyhood friends, and it might be Fred Frenning Sr.
He's actually the one now is the third.
Okay,
So
and
so
Junior.
so
Yeah.
your dad and Junior, I think, were friends.
They were boyhood friends, and they would get up early in the morning and go to where the railroad would come into town. It would be dark, and then there'd be a crowd of people by the railroad crossing waiting for the circus train to show up. And it would start. My dad would tell the story. They'd see a pinpoint of light in the distance down the tracks, and that's when they all perked up. There she is! And then the train would pull into the railroad siding, and they would stop the train, and they would immediately start unloading all these elephants. And way back in the 30s, they were still using Percheron horses to drag all of the wagons to the ground, which required a tremendous amount of immediate preparation. As soon as they stopped that train, it just turned into a gigantic, industrious beehive of activity. And then they would follow the wagons to the showgrounds, and in just a matter of hours, this gigantic city, this tented city with like 47 tents was all set up, and they were ready to they were making preparations for the matinee. It was just an absolutely amazing experience that I wish that I would have had the ability to witness. But
And then after the circus came to town, your dad and Fred Finning, what would they do?
they would stage a backyard circus. They had a kid in the neighborhood with a dog that would do a couple tricks, and another kid with a pony that would do some stuff. My dad was the tallest, so they made him the ringmaster. And then Fred had acquired an actual roll of tickets during a visit to the winter quarters in Sarasota. The Ringling Circus had acquired some wagons from other circuses, and he got his hands on a roll of tickets that was actually said Sparks Circus. So they had to name their circus Sparks Circus because that was the name on the tickets.
So your dad obviously had a love for the circus, and very early on he got you involved too, right?
Well, my mother took us to the circus when I was probably just barely old enough to walk because dad was away uh, doing, working somewhere. And I remember walking on the lot, walking across that crisp grass and seeing the tents in the distance and hearing the roar of lions and the tinny voice of the sideshow talker and the smells of the cotton candy mixing with that exotic smell of the elephants and all of that kind of stuff. And my mother commented to me, she said, "Your dad would love this." And I was sold on the spot.
Well, so then you started going to the circus a lot, especially when Beatty Cole came to town, right?
That was the Ringling Under Canvas was no longer available for me to witness. So I saw the Clyde Beatty Cole Brothers Circus every year when it came to Springfield, Ohio for one day. And I was up early, just like my dad would have been. And I was there. And then when I was big enough, I started helping out, spread the canvas, lace the canvas and help load the set up the grandstand chairs and all of that kind of stuff in exchange for earning a free ticket to see the circus. I'd hang
So
all day.
so you kind of go through life, you become a young teenager, you move out of Ohio. Tell me what happened between your junior and senior years.
By the time I was in a teenager, the level of frustration kind of increased at home, and I started to come up with a solution to what I perceived as the problem, and that was for me to go join the circus. And it was sort of serendipitous because during a railroad, I rode the train into downtown Chicago when I think it was 14 or 15. And at a newsstand, I looked at all the magazines, and there was one magazine there, and it was called Amusement Business. And that particular issue, I'd never seen one before. That particular issue had what was called the Circus Census in it. And so I was able to buy a magazine that had the name and address of every circus in the country. So whenever I got home, I proceeded to start writing letters. Hey, do you want a drummer for the summer? And mailed them all out. There's probably about 40 circuses. I mailed them all out a letter, and I got 8 responses. Yes, we'd love to have a drummer for the summer. So it ended up that my dad was kind of alarmed because of this crazy scheme that I'd came up with, but we ended up figuring out that the circus that was going to be the most convenient for me to spend the summer on was the Clark and Walters Circus. They were headquartered in Indiana, and they were going to be relatively close by to Illinois. They were going to be in Kentucky when it was time for me to join the circus. So I spent the summer months, 14 weeks, with the Clark and Walters Circus, playing the drums. But I actually, before I ever played the drums for the first time, they talked me into painting some decorations on the fleet.
And that's kind of where it all started for you, right?
Really did. Yep.
And so, this is obviously when you're a very young man. You've got this is for one of the carnivals that you were involved with early on, right?
Yeah, this would have been about 70, probably about 10 years later.
Okay.
10 or
But
7 years later, after I was 16. So I would have been closer to 28 or something.
But a lot happened between the time that you started with Clark and Walters and the time that you started painting too. You started training animals.
I fell in love with the animal training, and I just became fascinated. While I was sitting there playing the drums every show, I was watching what all of the acts were doing, especially, and I became fascinated with what the animal trainers were doing with their animals. And very fortunately, with the Silver Lake family, the the patriarch was Brownie Silverlake, and he was a very gentle man, and he was in charge of all the ponies and the goats and the llamas and all of the different animals. And he had a kind demeanor. Plus, he was full of stories. He was a storyteller.
He had been around on the shows back in the day, right? Brownie Silverlake.
Yeah, he grew up with the circuses that would used the horses to drag the wagons to the next town overnight. And he had all these stories to tell. So I was like a puppy following this guy around just because I wanted to hear all the stories. He talked
So
about M.L. Clark and Orange and Moon and the Mighty Hague shows and all those things.
yeah, those were some of the last of the wagon shows back in the early part of the 20th century. But in the 1970s, you found yourself on Fisher Brothers, Royal Brothers. Tell us a little bit about those mud shows that you were on, even up in Canada.
Be happy to. I actually, right after I graduated high school, Melvin Silverlake was impressed with me. So he came and got me as soon as I graduated. And I graduated early because of my double major. And I did a stint with marionette puppeteers. And then when we went to winter quarters, I helped him build, and we built a circus from scratch. And that's how Fisher Brothers Circus opened in 1971. And I was there for 71 and 72 when that circus started. We started with almost nothing, and it grew into a fairly a fairly adequate medium-sized mud circus.
Yeah, Fisher Brothers Circus of the 1970s, Melvin Silverlake.
That's right.
Obviously, that's a name that is important to American circus history. Obviously, not as well known as some of as Barnum and Ringling and so forth, but the Silverlakes have been involved in circuses for a long time. So when you look back on those days, here you are, basically a kid, late teens. You have this interest in animals and particularly horses. So how did that take off where you started training ponies and horses?
Well, it's all started in the cookhouse. We had our cook was Billy Grubb, and she was from Hugo, Oklahoma, and her husband's name was Bob Grubb, and he was a horse trainer. He was around Herb Walters for years, and Billy mentioned in passing when I was at the cookhouse, "Hey, Dave," because everybody noticed that I was fascinated with the animals. And she said, "Hey, my husband could help you train a Liberty Act of your own." So I ended up being encouraged, I guess you'd say, to step from the bandstand into the circus ring and become a performer. And
So, what, like 6 horses? Is that about what you had at that time?
I intended to match up 8, but out of the batch of 14, we ended up having 6 that matched up nicely.
So, how do you, I mean, we've had other people, other trainers, Heidi Harriet, different people on the show, but how do you figure out which are going to be the horses that are going to be smart enough to do it? And then also, how do you train them?
It's a long tedious process, and I was able to witness because I was Bob Grubb's assistant through the whole entire process. And it actually starts by becoming very, very observant, because the horses are not receptive to the typical stuff that human beings produce, like a need for ego gratification or something, like a lot of big shot circus performers are certainly capable of producing, but with a horse doesn't understand that. So it takes a different demeanor, and it's sort of like there's a need to connect with each one of these animals, find out what it is that they're good at, and then encourage them to produce something that they're inclined to want to do anyway, and then introduce some new stuff, with actually, Bob used to tell me the hardest thing to train a Liberty horse is to is something that you never see, and that is having the horse stay in the ring. And that's the way that a horse learns, is through constant repetition. You know, as they repeat an experience of being in the ring and having it be a safe place to be, and using the right kind of demeanor and encouragement and those kinds of things, the horse has no reason to leave the ring. And then over a long period of time, the horse becomes, I guess the word would be trust, and he becomes solid or well trained. And but yeah, it takes time and repetition.
And then it was not that much longer until you started training high school horses, right?
Well, I went up the ladder. There's like a ladder that you gotta go to. You don't go straight to high school horses. My very first horse was what's called a manage horse, and the manage horse is like intermediate type thing. On the big railroad circuses of yesteryear, especially like Cole Brothers Circus, they had a fleet of like 30 manage horses, because you could put almost anybody on a manage horse, teach them how to get the horse to do the things that they do, and they would bow, and they would sit down or lay down and sit up and march and rear, those kinds of things. They're like poses. They would teach them how to get the animals to do the particular poses, and they'd have a huge display of like 30 manage horses. And that was the prerequisite for bringing in the cream of the crop, and that was the high school horses. And there would only be like 3 high school horses, one for each ring. And the high school horses were the ones that would do the movements, the passage, which is the slow elevated trot, and the piaffe, and the 3-step, and the march, and then even a 3-legged canter, where they would hold up one leg and canter on the other 3, and do all of these advanced things that just takes years to not only train the horse, but it takes actually longer for the human being to develop the ability to work in pure harmony with the horse to accomplish. Because the high school stuff was regarded as appropriate for the kings and queens and their court, an activity for them to be involved in. So it was actually the top of the performing arts heap was the high school horses.
You know, you're a very interesting guy. I think, as anyone watching this knows. You mentioned kind of in passing that you always had 2 majors. You were an artist, and you also had a real interest in writing, right? And you have become quite an accomplished author over the past several years. In fact, you have a new book coming out that we're going to talk about in a little bit. But how did you start writing?
Writing, actually, I think that creative people are creative in all areas, and I always had a aptitude for writing, but my writing didn't start until about 40 years ago. And it started with, it actually, of all places, it started with the recovery process, where an inventory began, a relational and a behavioral inventory, and it was all for the sake of the recovery process, recovery from alcoholism. And that's how it started. And then it evolved from there, because I was encouraged to make writing part of my daily routine. And then as soon as all of the recovery process was taken care of, I kept writing. And by this time I had found a huge market for putting murals on motorhomes. And I started writing marketing material to get the name Letterfly out there in the industry. And then that progressed to me writing interesting essays about what was happening. And then the next thing you know, I'm taking writing classes in the wintertime at the local university, and I bumped into a writing professor, and he took a liking to me, and I showed him what I had, and he said, "Here, let me take that with me." And he took it for a year, and then he came back and says, "Hey, you got a book here. I'm going to show you how you go about putting one together." So with his help, we got one book started, and the next thing you know, I got 3 more in the works, and a couple more. I keep, writing is part of my everyday. I get up early,
And
right?
and you're a very talented writer. You are, Dave. We'll talk a little bit more about the books, but I want to talk about your painting. You talked a little bit about these motorhomes, but I happen to know that it really started at the carnival, right? How did you get over there? And here's one of my favorite examples of one of your pieces that you did pretty early on. Tell us about this truck here.
This truck was being this they acquired this truck just to make a showpiece in Michigan. They found it in Pennsylvania. It was an old horse truck, 1927, white. And Glenn Wade and Red Wood and Jim Elliott put it in the barn in the wintertime, and they'd use their crew to completely restore it. And whenever it was kind of a happy accident. In 1980, I sold my 6-pony Liberty Act to Ian Garden up in Canada. And on the way back from Canada, after selling the ponies, I was sad, and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. Life is over. My Liberty Act my beloved ponies are gone. And I figured, what the heck? I'll stop in at the winter quarters in the wintertime in Mason, Michigan. And I stopped in, and they were building this thing. And I had painted for them 2 years prior. I had painted at a couple of county fairs for them. And when I went to the barn and I saw this big red truck they were making, that's when Red, the co-owner of the show, said, "Davey, we got a project for you." And so all of a sudden I knew what I was doing.
So I really want to talk about this truck a little bit because it's so impressive. So, it's obviously a calliope that you painted on the side there, but all of that scroll work and everything, what did you use as a template, and how do you draw this out on a piece of paper so that you know exactly what the dimensions are going to be? Do you do it by little squares? Do you project it? How do you get it up there?
I hand drew my designs on large pieces of what they called butcher paper, and I'd perforate it, and with the ability and that's called a pattern. And when you got a pattern, you have the ability to make identical, symmetrical, one side will be identical to the other side. So with this one, I would have made maybe 2 different patterns for the bottom, and then I used them repeatedly.
Okay.
Locations in order to get that effect. And that was something that I learned. I actually learned that around the circus.
So
when we had an old time sign painter show up on the Fisher Brothers Circus in 1971, and he took me under his wing. I had done the crude lettering that was on the show at the time, and he came and gave the circus a facelift, and I was like his right-hand man, and he taught me how to make patterns and showed me which brushes to use and taught me a whole bunch of stuff.
But
So,
and we're going to look at some of the other amazing artwork you've done that you've originated yourself. But this particular piece also, I think, is kind of interesting. Beautiful old bandwagon or band organ, rather. How does it feel when you're taking a look at a piece that might be 100 years old and you're the guy that has to restore it?
yeah, and give it a facelift and make it look even better. It's just I was actually complimented when this particular customer requested that I do the work on this thing. It was a beautiful piece.
You know, you talk about facelifts. This next slide here, this is a ride, a carnival ride, which you obviously did a great job of lettering that. But the carnival business, a lot of times they do try to take an older ride and give it that facelift you were talking about, right?
That's exactly right, because their rides go on the same route year after year. So they give them a facelift so that the public will think it's a new ride.
And this one here, it looks like they wanted to make it look like a pirate ride of some sort.
Yeah, the name of that ride is Tip Top, and we gave it a pirate theme. So the scenic panels all the way around the outside had pirates and treasures and ships and treasure chests and palm trees and sexy pirate girls and all that kind of stuff all over the whole thing.
So this is obviously a Ferris wheel. I don't know how many cars there are in this thing, but how long does it take to do a project like this? I got to think that, you know, you can't turn one of these out every day.
This was actually, it took 2 days to do this. And this one is actually the story about doing this Eli 16 is in my first book, because my dad and I had a summer together, and my dad and the carnival had this thing hooked up to an old time steam engine. And my dad had actually had a job at the Chicago Railroad Fair building fires in steam locomotives when he was in college. And so we actually had the ability to work together on this project. He would get in the morning, we'd get up early before the fair started, and he'd start to get the fire going in the steam engine, and I'd get the pattern and the painting on the tubs that I could reach from the ground. And by the time I had the first 2 done, he'd have a head of steam in the machine, and he could make the whole thing move so I could have access to the next 2 tubs.
So you actually painted that while you were on the road, not when it was in winter quarters or anything like that.
No, we did that one at the fairgrounds. And in order to do a job like that, you got to do it in the morning before they run people on it all day long.
Very interesting. So this next one that I want to show here, our friend Jim Elliott, this is one of his band organs. Again, did you paint this on the lot, or did you paint this one and they took it to the lot?
Actually, yeah, we did this one during the county fair circuit during the summertime. And this unit, it actually underneath of the sign in the center where it says Elliott Amusement Company, I made a removable panel that fits right into that shape, and it's covering up W.G. Wade shows, which is underneath. And now Bill Hall owns this now. He's got that down at his place in
just outside of Orlando. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So Bill has that particular machine now.
So this next item here, I think, is kind of interesting too, because obviously it shows it's very commercial. But when you look at it closely, especially those letters for hot dogs and popcorn, I mean, that's the geometric designs. This is all something you came up with, right?
Yeah, this was a collaboration between my customer and the manufacturer of the trailer. They wanted something extra special to showcase at a trade show. And if you'll notice, the removable hitch in the foreground has some elaborate decorations on it, which would probably just going over the top, you know.
Yeah, but it does match the rest of the trailer there too.
And the blue bands around the bottom of it are actually metal flake. So it's pretty fancy paint job that I handled for him. I would have done that one in the early 80s, I think. And
yeah, the geometric designs there really, you know, it almost looks 3-dimensional, doesn't it?
Yeah, and then that concession trailer after the trade show went to Kansas State University, where it was going to live for its career, I guess you'd say.
Here's another great band organ. You know, a little more contemporary look on it, but definitely a classic merry-go-round, classic carousel.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely.
So you know, we talked a little bit about carousel horses too. Now, this is not a wooden horse. Tell me a little bit about these horses.
I wasn't around very many wooden horses that were being used on a day-to-day basis on the carnival. By the time I was around the carnival, they were all cast aluminum or fiberglass. The wooden ones that are very, very old and extensively ornate are highly collectible. So most of those ended up being in people's collections and living rooms and different things like that. So the working horses, they get beat up because of that set up and take it down every week. So they were constantly being touched up.
Yeah,
And
I'm sure they were. This is aluminum then.
those would cast aluminum. And the thing that I the thing that was perfect for me at that point in my career, painting for the carnival gave me an elaborate variety of kinds of opportunities to paint different kinds of things. You know, in addition to making merry-go-round horses look realistic and elaborate lettering and scroll work and giant images of Frankenstein and everything you can think of, sexy pirates and Conan the Barbarian and it just gave me a great place to develop my skills as an artist at that particular point in my life, which prepared me for the next chapter, which was right around the bend when the sign painting game all changed thanks to the computer.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that and sign painting over wraps and things like that, the advantages. But right now, I want to remind people that you're watching Circus History Live. Circus History Live is our monthly opportunity to get together with folks who've had an impact on circus history of either the past or the present or even tomorrow in some cases. Today, we're fortunate enough to have Dave Knoderer, also known as David Letterfly, as our guest, talking about his long career in circus and sideshow and carnival painting, also as a performer. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about his writing career and what he's doing today. One of the shows that is on the road right now that you do a lot of work for is Bernardo's, Kevin Bernardo's circus. This is a photograph here of you working on, I guess that's his bunkhouse, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, Kevin, he wants people to know when the circus comes to town that the circus comes to town, right? So it's really important for him to have rolling stock that really looks like a circus. Do you work with him to kind of talk about ideas of what you're going to do?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. He's a man of many, many visions, and he's got some branding that works. So definitely. And then he loves the old hand painted circusy scroll work. It's classic circus. So yeah, definitely.
This is a truck that I had the opportunity to see actually just a few months ago. It's only been on the road for a few months, I guess. Tell me a little bit about it's a candy truck. How did Kevin come up with the design for this?
Well, Kevin actually came to me and he said, I want that truck over there to be pink. And I immediately saw how huge of a job that was going to be to transform that big giant truck into a giant pink truck. And I started by having other ideas to bounce off of him. And then I ended up realizing, wait a minute, Dave, when the customer has something clear in his mind, the best thing for you to do is to make sure that he gets what it is and he had a great idea, a gigantic pink truck. And see, the whole idea was instead of having circus down the side, it says candy for a couple of reasons. And the main reason was his grandfather was in the candy business. I think was it New York or Maybe
I
it
think
was
it was in the Chicago area, actually.
Chicago.
Might have been in New York. Might have been in New York.
He was honoring his grandfather with Venardo's candy on this gigantic truck.
And when you see it on the lot by his tent, it definitely has an impact. You've done other things for Kevin too. This is an example of when you're inside the big top. You see this toy stand. He's got a food stand that looks similar. Again, mostly your ideas, or does he give you sort of the idea and you jump on it?
Yeah, well, yeah, I had all of these ideas because that's the thing across the top is actually folds down against the top of that big cabinet, and then two outer wings fold in, and it's actually illuminated. We've actually got the LEDs on the inside. The little dots around the letters are actually clear marbles.
Amazing.
That are mounted in it. So he actually encourages me to have new ideas. And if you look closely on top of those two tiers, it looks like bull tubs in the center.
Yep.
I actually made a figurine that looks like Kevin standing there on the
yeah.
tubs on the inside, welcoming people to the toys. So he's one of those special customers who gives me free reign to become as elaborate as I can be, because I think it's a form of entertainment.
And there you are with Kevin.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, if you have an opportunity, folks, and of course, Kevin has been on Circus History Live with us in the past. You can go back and watch it. But I know he has, it's no secret, he has a second unit that he's going to have coming out very soon. And I imagine you're going to be involved with that too.
That's for sure. He's already reserved my November and December for his projects, because we got to duplicate all of this stuff that we've got on unit number 1.
So, sometimes we think of, you go to Circus World Museum or the Ringling Museum, and you see these old circus wagons that were repurposed over the years with various shows. Tell me a little bit about this particular ticket wagon, which I think a lot of us have seen over the past 20, 25 years, and how you got involved with it.
I think that trailer was originally designed and built by David Rawls, and then his brother Bobby did the artwork on it. And that was all back when the Rawls family were involved with Kelly Miller.
Yeah, this was the old Kelly Miller ticket wagon that a lot of us saw, and now it's Loomis Brothers. And what all did you do to kind of give it a new facelift, as you said earlier?
Yep, Justin simply wanted it. The paint job on it was, I think, 12 or 14 years old, and it was getting a little tired. And Justin simply wanted all of the artwork to be double coated. And so the only thing that I actually added was the Loomis lettering across the top, and then the little incidental lettering in those two blue panels. And I double coated all of Bobby Rawls's artwork.
So, so what I'm looking, this is the other side of the truck, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, a lot of, now you had to obviously change that from Kelly Miller on that side of the truck because of the title.
Yeah, and then and then made it into Loomis.
Yep, just a little more work, but again, you got the scroll work. I mean, when somebody sees that rolling down the street, or if they see it sitting on a vacant lot by a big top somewhere, they know that's a circus truck.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's because of you. I want to talk a little bit now about what you have done other than circus painting, because I know that you enjoy, you've done motorhomes, you've done buses, tour buses, things like that for rock shows. I mean, how do you get that work? You've been very popular on the motorcycle circuit, I know too.
Definitely. And as I look back over my career, it's mostly due to the happy accidents that take place. I had I was doing a large front on a carnival concession trailer, oh, 30 some years ago. No, probably more than that, 40 years ago. And I got all completely done with this beautiful scene. And the lady came, approved it, paid me, and then left. She hooked it up behind her motorhome and left. And then she calls me up a couple days later and she goes, Dave, you know those two umbrellas that you painted on the front? You know, one for the fruit girl with the fruit cart and the other one with this guy at a sitting at a picnic table under an umbrella eating a waffle cone full of custard. And I said, yeah. Well, one of the umbrellas, you forgot to put the spike that sticks out of the top of the umbrella. And he went, oh man, where are you? So I had to throw a ladder in the van, the Volkswagen van, and where are you? And she said, she gave me directions to where she was. She was at the fairgrounds in Tampa. So I go to the fairgrounds. There's an event taking place. I explain what I'm doing to the guy at the guard. Oh yeah, go ahead. So I go find the joint and get my ladder out, set it up in front of the booth, go up with my paint. It took me like longer to describe how long it's going to take than it took to actually do. And I put the spike on the top of the umbrella, and right at that exact same minute, a guy rolls by on his bicycle and he stops and he looks at this big elaborate front that I had painted, and he waits for me to come down off the ladder and he goes, will you come with me? And I said, yeah. And so I go with him, and it ends up that the RV Super Show is going on at the fairgrounds, and he had just purchased a brand new, one of the fanciest motorhomes that you can possibly get, a brand new Bluebird Wander Lodge, and he wanted his happy hours lettered across the top of it. So the next thing you know, I'm on that same ladder in front of the fanciest motorhome in the whole place, and I'm lettering on the front of this, probably $1 million motorhome.
Wow.
And thousands of people saw me, and that's what introduced me to the next chapter of my artistic career. Just a happy accident.
We spoke a little bit about your writing also, which is really something that I want to talk about. You spoke very candidly about how you got interested in it. Not everybody can write. You have a real gift for it, Dave. But let's kind of run through a little bit about how you got really. You said that you had a sort of a mentor who helped you out. But the reality is, you still have to have the talent, right? And so, when you take a look at some of the books that you've done, Speedy is a book, Tales of a Traveling Airbrush, which is one of the great titles, I think, and it's absolutely true. Tell us what I know that there are going to be a lot of people who are going to want to buy these books. Tell us what they're about.
Well, my very first book, Speedy, Hurled Through Havoc, gives you some background to kind of explain where my passion comes from. And what I do at the beginning was I drop the reader right into the circus experience of 1931, when my dad and his boyhood friend Fred get up early and they wait for the circus train to pull into town so they can watch the circus get assembled on the great big grassy field that's a mile away from the railroad tracks. And I tell the story in that book about that day that they spent together and what it was that they saw, which involved a lot of research and a lot of imagination. Yeah, and there it is right there.
And there's the book itself. So I have been fortunate enough to read some of your books. Is everything in it true?
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, some of the stories that you have had in your career, they're amazing. And again, whether it's Speedy, you've got a new book that's coming out right now. which I think is also going to be something that is going to be a terrific addition to anybody's library. You know, if they have an interest in circus history at all. Tell us a little bit about Kinker.
Kinker, Circusing the 70s, tells the story about uh, me as a teenager and the things that fell together, just like that serendipitous discovery of a magazine with all of the addresses of all the circuses in it that one Chicago Saturday afternoon. And it tells the story about not only my experience with the Silver Lake family, but it elaborates and includes lots of stories that would have taken place in the cookhouse about people in their family and the things in the past and what had happened back on the old horse-drawn wagon shows and all kinds of stuff. And then it takes the reader also through it's about a 10-year period of my life. It takes the reader from the very first circus I was ever on, and then some of the growth that occurred as I acquired my 6-pony Liberty Act, and then my first horse, and goes all the way to the calamity that occurred as the result of my excesses and what happened, and then having to regroup after a disaster, and then rebuilding it, and then making a triumphant return to the King Brothers Circus. And it's just pure circus all the way.
Yeah, you were there the last year of the King Brothers Circus, weren't you?
In 19, yeah.
Yeah, that was 78.
78, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, again, for the people who are on this particular call, because I know who they are. And like me, those were the circuses that we grew up with. I think that, Kinker is definitely something that people should consider adding to their bookshelf. But tell me a little bit about, how they can get it. Is it actually available yet? I know you've got some advanced copies out there.
It's not quite available. I've got just about everything done. I'm waiting for a couple of reviews. I've got some reviews from some prestigious circus people that I want to include, like Tim Tiggy and yourself, and Fred Fenning III has assured me that he'll send me a review I can include, and Kevin Venardos and a couple of other. It's interesting. Kevin, I told Kevin about being on the King Brothers Circus in 1978, and he said, "Dave, I wasn't even born yet."
Well, it again, for those of you on this call who have any memory of those circuses of the 1970s, especially the mud shows, the shows like Fisher Brothers, the shows like King Brothers, the Royal Brothers. Dave was there, and he's got great tales and a real gift for writing. You really do, Dave. When we take a look at kind of the future of sign painting in general, we talked about wraps. You go out and you see these vinyl wraps on everything from, pretty much anything, a taxi cab to, at Kevin Bernardo's, some of his vehicles are also wrapped. Tell me, other than the sort of expense side of it, what's the difference between really having a vinyl and a hand painted truck or vehicle of some sort?
Well, it's actually like comparing apples to oranges, because they're two completely different products. A computer generated digital printed wrap is just an elaborate form of like a wallpaper that you can have virtually anything on. And when you want something that's hand painted, it requires the use of a tradesman, an artisan, to accomplish the work. So you really can't compare the two, even though you can use one or the other to decorate your circus truck. the upside to a vinyl wrap is cost. You can get a vinyl wrap a lot cheaper than you can, and a lot quicker than you can a hand painted thing, but it has a lifespan. So the con would be, you know, a 5-year lifespan before the ink starts to fade. A hand painted circus truck like Loomis Brothers concession trailer it'll still be nice and bright and bragging that they got a nice circus for, you know, a lot more years than a digital printed wrap.
So what are you doing nowadays? I mean, I know you're in North Carolina today. I know you don't live in North Carolina. What are you up to?
I have evolved. I have evolved over the years. I love being on the road, and I found a great way to make a living with my paintbrush. And I have a route of Harley-Davidson motorcycle dealerships that love having me as a value-added attraction at their store. So I'm still doing like on a circus, except instead of 1-day stands, I'm making 1-week stands. Every week I'm at a different Harley-Davidson store. I've dragged the VW bus behind the RV, and the VW bus has all of the components to my booth that load inside the bus. And then I go to my Harley store, set up my booth in the parking lot, and they start rolling motorcycles in and out. And I can paint virtually anything you can think of, thanks to my background of not only painting all kinds of elaborate things on the carnival, but especially during the 20 years of putting custom murals on motorhomes. I painted virtually every subject that you can imagine.
This you talk about the VW bus, and I think that that's as much associated with you as your mustache. Everybody, if they see that yellow bus coming, they know who's coming, right, Dave?
Right. Yeah, definitely.
How many of these buses have you had?
Oh, I've been working out of VW buses my entire career. I've easily have had 12 or 15, and at the current time, I have 4.
Wow, it's amazing. Well, they are truly pieces of art, as is everything that we have seen tonight, and your story that you have told us also. You know, we think about circus history, we think about the people who were executives or performers, but there's so many people behind the scenes who have given so much of their life, and you are certainly one of those people who keeps doing that. I want to wish you the very best on your upcoming book. Hopefully, we will have an opportunity to share that again with many of the people on this call and others who have an interest in circus history, because it certainly is circus history, especially from the 1970s.
Now, tell your listeners about my other book, The Galloping Snapper.
Let's talk about the Galloping Snapper a little bit, and that title is definitely one that gets your attention.
The Galloping Snapper, the slang for an itinerant sign painter is a snapper.
I did not know that.
Because they would, instead of carrying a yardstick, they would carry a piece of string. They would put some chalk on the string, and they would use that to establish their straight lines before they would paint a sign. And then the galloping part has to do with my relationship with performing horses. And that particular book starts when I sold the 6 Pony Liberty Act to Ian Garden. And then it goes to where I stopped in at the Wade Show winter quarters and discovered that great big red truck they wanted me to decorate. And it carries the reader through another 10 years of my career, not only painting around the carnivals, but going from my first horse and then going into my second horse, which was Evie Caroli, helped me with and I ended up with a high school horse. She did the passage and the 3-step and all of those advanced movements, and it carries the reader all the way through my career with her, performing with the circuses and stuff. So that's another book for you to tell your listeners about, and it's available on Amazon.
Galloping Snapper, Kinker's soon to be available on Amazon, and of course, your very first book, which is the one that tells the story of your father and his relationship with Fred Fenning, which was Speedy hurled through havoc.
Yeah.
David Letterfly, it's been a delight to talk with you today. You definitely are part of Circus History, and we look forward to talking to you again soon and wish you the very best. Bruce?
Well, thank you so much, Dave, and thank you, Chris, for this evening. This was a terrific, terrific program. Dave, it was great to see you do this program for us and bring another aspect of circus history to our program, Circus History Live. Thank you so much. I'd also like to thank Aíne Norris, who's behind the scenes doing the recording, and she'll be editing this the recording of this program. It'll be placed up on our YouTube channel, the Circus Historical Society's YouTube channel, where there are recordings of all of our Circus History Live programs and our Circus Spotlight programs, which are short videos that mostly Chris does, but I've done a few myself. And I'd also like to thank all of you for coming tonight and attending our program. If you're not already a member of the Circus Historical Society, please consider joining. It's only $60 a year. You get a lovely journal that comes out quarterly with terrific stories and articles about every aspect of circus history you can imagine. But with that, I'm going to sign off. Any final words, Dave, before we go?
I just want to thank you for having me on the show and giving me this opportunity to share the love that I have, especially for the creative part of what the circus is.
Well, wonderful. Chris, final word?
See you down the road.
See you down the road. Good night,
see you next
everybody.
time on Circus History Live.
Night. Bye-bye.